this group was based in San Antonio,
Mm-hmm.
and being in the great state of Texas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Being the border state and the situation with the border right now, and you have a lot of illegal immigrants coming into the state that are not documented, that are not being tracked, that may not have a huge digital footprint. What's the threat assessment role there, I guess, and or is there one? And then, how do you circumvent, figuring out what's going on with them without having all the information you have on a U.S. citizen?
That's going to be an ongoing problem that you're just going to have to figure a way around it, right? Because you are going to have a lot of people that don't have, there's no history and background on them.
Well, what would help?
I certainly know that in Texas, illegal immigrants it's taxing the community, right? And so certainly being able to document people and have history on people would be really helpful.
Well, we've always talked about it. It becomes this kind of goes into a different realm, but I know a national ID has been discussed. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know as a former law enforcement officer, trying to identify someone who's coming from another country, not just Mexico, it's difficult, right? You have somebody with 4 different last names, you identify them, you try to hold them for Homeland Security or INS at the time. Unless it was a group detention, they're not coming to get them. That person is not detained, and they're back out in society. So I know it was very difficult. I don't know if that changed in the last 2 years since I retired, but I can tell you that identifying someone who's almost damn near impossible to identify, we can't hold on to them. They're back into society. Mm-hmm. So it's a very difficult thing. I know that a national ID is not something that's very popular, but if I asked everybody in the studio right now, do you have ID? All of us would have a driver's license. So I don't know what the pushback is, oh my God, it sounds so horrible to have a national ID. My 16-year-old son has an ID. Everybody I know, children have IDs. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But
I don't know that there's an answer either. But I feel very sorry for especially the young children that are just like nobody knows anything about them.
Yeah.
Oh. What a terrible feeling as a child, I would expect.
Yeah, I don't know. It gets very difficult. The waters get muddied, and we've talked about this at length. But I feel from a law enforcement standpoint, from a threat assessment standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint, I don't know. Is it a little over 8 million now, or 9 million suspected?
Yeah, somewhere around 8 million.
That's very tough for 8 million people who we may or may not actually know their identity. That's very tough. And like I said, from a law enforcement perspective, just from that, I'd like to know who I'm dealing with. That's all. From a one-on-one standpoint, if this is a rapist, murderer, thief, whatever it is, or somebody with a mental illness, I would like to know about it. You know how it is when we run people on our system and they come up and they have a history of mental illness or some type of criminal activity. At least I know it. I can see it.
Well, it frames how you approach them too.
100%. 100%. And that's what I tell people. Why is it so important to know? It's hugely important to know.
It's for first responder safety.
100%. If I'm running across a 6'2", 285-pound monster, no offense, right, with bad intentions, and then I identify him. And I identify this person. I want to know before he goes off. At least I can see them and identify them.
Right? And then you think about that. If you know somebody's criminal history, if you know what their mental health history is, and okay, are they on their medications? Are they off their medications? That makes a huge difference in how you might approach them.
Absolutely.
And honestly, in many cases too, that's for that individual's safety as well.
Yeah.
Right? For when we were doing CIT, it's crisis intervention training. Teaching law enforcement and firefighters how to recognize when it might be a mental illness versus somebody who's just drunk versus somebody who might have a cognitive disorder.
Sure.
That's for first responder safety.
Yes.
But for that individual's safety as well.
100%. Again, that goes down a whole another rabbit hole. People think it's an invasion of their privacy. Well, if they have a mental disorder or they're ill, we know how to better handle them. If we don't know this and their behavior is erratic, We just handle that. We think they're might be violent. We don't realize, oh, there's a lot of medical issue back here.
Right.
It could be to their benefit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's most likely always going to be for their benefit.
100%.
Truly.
Yeah. So do we want to arrest this person, detain them, arrest them, or Matt, you need to get this individual some medical help?
That's an interesting line right there, though, isn't it? Because your average U.S. citizen, you know, if they don't feel that they've done anything wrong and they're being stopped by a cop, and the cop's asking for their ID, well, hey, I've not done anything wrong, so I don't need to give you my ID. I'm an American citizen. I can go along and be on my way.
Yeah.
And then there's the situation which we're talking about, where, you know, if you know who that person is and their background, it could save their life.
It very much could save their life when you think about it. Texas went a couple of years ago. They initiated where on your driver's license, if you had autism, there would be a place to mark that, because if you've ever interacted with somebody with autism, they might socially do things differently than, and I do this, a normal person, right? So it's for their benefit.
Did you just look at me when you said that?
No. No.
I felt a little side eye. Maybe I just saw it myself.
That was all you, George.
Okay,
That was all you.
So then it steps into the, you know, is this discrimination or a HIPAA violation? You know, to have to disclose your conditions to the public.
I mean, it could be, but it's also for your safety. It's just like, if I'm diabetic, do I want some marking on me, like, to know that if I don't look right, that I might be having a problem with my diabetes?
Yeah, when we were kids, we had medical bracelets.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, it's for their safety. I mean, I get that people value their privacy. I completely do. But we all have to follow rules, right?
Yeah.
And first responders, police, are the rule keepers. And so if an officer asks me for my driver's license, I'm going to give it to him. Like, why not?
Unless
Right?
it's this guy.
Shady all day long.
Shady, I just go out grabbing IDs. Just identifying
yours,
people.
and yours.
I need yours. No, yeah.
It's for their safety. I don't know when we become a society of it's all about my rights and I don't have to follow the rules. Like,
Well, I think our rights have been stepped on, you know, a little bit too much lately. I think that's part of the problem. I don't think 10 or 15 years ago we had this big of a problem. You know, it wasn't, people weren't thinking about the same issues. But, you know, it's kind of you give them an inch, they take a mile. And we're starting to see the effects of what happens when the ordinary citizen has their rights stepped on or are superseded by something they're not voting for or didn't have the opportunity to vote for. Then it does become a problem, because it's like, hey, what are they going to take away next?
well, then people get angry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I get that balance too, though. I do understand that. It's not a black or white issue. It's very gray in there. Because I understand that.
Yeah. I've discussed this before with my sister-in-law, and she happens to be an attorney. But she said something, and I thought that's correct. She says, not only is there a massive amount of just information overload about the legal system, but a lot of disinformation. And we talked about social media earlier in the internet. I mean, I've seen people on there trying to tell people how to interact when dealing with a police officer and what you can and cannot do. And I'm like, actually, that's not true.
Yeah, that's wrong.
But they have 1 million likes, you know, and I'm like, actually, that's incorrect. But, you know, so I would just be careful to you out there in TV land. Some of this information you're getting, be very careful when you tell a police officer when you're legally stopped, I don't have to give you my ID, I don't have to stop for you. I think that's where sometimes things get awry. But I don't want to get off topic here. I think that what you say is amazing. And yes, what a great point. I really hadn't thought about it until you just mentioned it, about dealing with however you want to identify them as illegal immigrants or migrants or whatever you want to call them, right? Citizens coming in or whatever. Doesn't matter.
Well, migrants are coming over legally.
Yes.
They're documented. They've, either claimed asylum or
how about undocumented?
have gone through, the process, so they can be identified.
Yes.
They're doing this,
Legally.
They're migrating. This is a process.
Yeah.
And their hopes to live here, live out the American dream, become an American citizen.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think what we're talking about is the people that aren't.
That's what I meant. I meant the undocumented.
Right.
And that's a very, that's a very rocky road. I can tell you from a law enforcement standpoint, it was very unnerving to not know who I was interacting with at all. I could not find them in any system. I did not know anything about them.
We don't even know if the name they're giving you is
Oh,
right.
100%. And then, do they really speak any English or not speak English? Are they just feigning? All these things that people don't understand. And sometimes it's 2 or 3 in the morning, and I do not know who I'm talking. I have no idea.
Right.
Yeah, it could be a family who's just trying to get over here for a better life.
Yeah.
But it could also be a cartel member who's running sex trafficking ring or fentanyl or other, dangerous things into the country.
Well, you're right, and you don't know.
If they're undocumented, there's no way to know.
Yeah.
Well, another terrible thing that happened near San Antonio shortly after the Uvalde shooting is a semi-truck transporting 53 illegal immigrants into the country. Can't remember the details if the truck driver just stopped and went to check, but all 53 people in the back of that truck were dead because they didn't turn on the air conditioner.
Down there. Yeah, sure.
It was a refrigerated truck and they didn't turn on the air conditioner.
And closing the border and having a legal process for people to go through would help avoid something like
53 innocent people died.
Yeah.
Young, many of them young too.
Yeah.
Because they were caught in the back of that truck with no air conditioning and no way to get out.
Yeah, well, constantly, and I guess on a side note to that, I this misplaced or this righteous indignation that only happens in certain times, right? Undocumented migrants who come here, undocumented people who come in here, and people are so upset that we stop them. Yet I don't hear so much outrage when 50 of them die in the back of a truck or drown or die in the desert.
Oh.
I hear crickets, and that's where I always think I don't understand it. It's very selective outrage when I hear about these things. And I'll just go off on my little tangent about that. The same people who are saying, let them in, let them in. I want to hear that outrage when they're dying, when children drown and die in the desert or in the back of a truck or trafficked in our city of San Antonio or even here.
Yeah.
And I don't hear a lot, of outrage from a certain segment of society who's just saying, "Where's your heart? Where's your compassion? Let them in." Where are the protests? Where's the outrage? Why aren't you yelling about this? But they're not.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from the political polarization that we have now, and so there's a lot of virtue signaling for your party, and some of it blindly, like you said. Some of the people who live, who aren't close to the border, it's there. They can go down and take a look at it. You can see the problem firsthand.
Yes,
but they're not seeing that, and the media is not always 100% truthful.
Shut your mouth, Nick.
It's hard. It's hard. Like you said, there's a lot of information out there, which means there's a lot of disinformation. And there's also media companies running a narrative. And so they're strategically putting in what they want you to see. So it's easy to get a crowd of people to form an opinion about something and only see one side of it. Well, because we have an open border, these people are able to come over here. Well, but they don't see that because they're not going through a legal process to get in here, nobody's being held accountable for the safety of those people.
Yes.
We probably get more of it, and maybe even here too, than some of the northern states, right? Because in our media outlets, weekly, there's going to be stories of babies drowning in the river. Sex trafficking in San Antonio is huge because we're I-35, it's crossroads, right? And I-10. So we're crossroads from two major highways that connect all parts of this country.
So it's a hub that they can spread across the country from there. We don't hear a lot of that here in our media. I've read a few articles, and and it's mind blowing some of the articles that I'm reading from the local newspapers, on the Texas border towns. And then we don't hear any of that up here.
The police officers that discover, 12 kids being trafficked in a dirty apartment. I was trying to think of a proper word to say there.
Yeah, proper word. And it's just disgusting. And I said, this righteous indignation, when you see or hear firsthand, it's an eye-opener. I've said this time and time again, and I'm saying it again. I say it almost every episode that we do discuss about the border. If you're somebody out there that doesn't believe it's that bad, no one stops you. These highways aren't closed. You can drive right to the border. Get out, take the kids, and go see what's going on day to day. If you're a naysayer and you don't believe the border's that bad, or if you believe the numbers are inflated, go spend the day and watch.
Yeah, it's terribly sad. I mean, I'll think back to some of the debriefings I did after they found those 53 immigrants in the back of that trailer. And these were people who had just died of heat stroke, so they didn't look like anything was wrong with them. They were just dead.
Yeah.
And many of them late teens, early 20s,
Yes,
wanting to come
I
start a
remember.
new life.
Yeah.
And on from my end of it, what does that do to the first responder that has to open up the back of that truck and see claw marks where people were trying to claw their way out? And again, they don't look like they have any trauma. They're just dead.
It's terrible. And again, if I want to reemphasize, right, being second generation here, for some of my family from Mexico, I'm all about this country being built on the back of immigrants. That's a fact. These are people, those are lives, 53 lives are lost all this month. And these are people and human beings. My heart goes out to them. So those of you who just keep saying, come on over, I want you to track these people and find out what their lives look like and what happened to these particularly young females a year from now. And but I want to hear your selective outrage then. I just kind of, if that really bothers me.
Right. And people are so out of touch too.
Yes.
I think about, like let them come, but I don't want it to be my problem. What about that fire department in Eagle Pass, Texas, that doesn't have the manpower to take care of that many individuals?
Yeah.
The police departments, the homeless shelter, if there is one, they just can't. There's not the resources.
No.
So then what happens when there's not resources for people?
No.
It's not going to be a good situation.
It's not. This is a national policy. This administration, whether you like it or hate it, it seems to be a national policy of a you can say it's semi-closed border. I think it's a fully open border. This is a national policy. This is a national problem. So every state in the union, open up your doors. Right? It's just not a Texas problem. This is not an Arizona problem. Let's go, team. Right?
Well,
Everyone.
then you get back into the virtue signaling, blindly, because you'll have a city declare themselves as a sanctuary city. New York City, Chicago. Look at the problems that they're having now, because people don't usually. There's not this big of an influx of people into, communities. When
The
you have
system
an
can't
influx
support
of
it.
100,000 people into a community, you don't have the resources. Your infrastructure is not built out. We don't just have extra, EMS on standby.
No.
There's not just guys waiting in
No,
the wings.
there's not.
So, when you have an extra 100,000 people, and you have some of these, resources that, now they're working overtime. Now, it's a taxpayer burden. And, we're trying to hire new people, but to get new people hired and trained is a process. Even
It's
for
a
the
several
police
year
department, yeah,
process.
it's 2-3 years.
Yeah.
To get a guy up to speed, and for EMS, for first responders, it's a little quicker. But, there's not, a pool of qualified people to just step in. And so, when you have that and you can't take care of them, what happens? These people get left to the side.
Yeah.
And now you have, either a homeless population or a gigantic tax burden. And, I think there was Naperville, just outside of Chicago, sanctuary city. Hey, they said, we can't take care of these people. We don't have the resources to take care of these people. If you're willing, will you bring any of these migrants into your homes? Not one.
Crickets.
Not one person had done it as of yesterday.
Well, we all want it to be somebody else's problem. It's not a problem for us until it happens to us, right? I think it's really easy for people to say, open the borders, let people in, right? And let me say, I'm not a super conservative person. I get more conservative as I get older, right? But it's easy to say that when it's not your problem. But when it becomes your problem, when you're a rancher that has people camped all over their ranch, like, I don't know that guy's not a rapist sleeping out in my field. Like, I have kids, you know what I mean? It's just that kind of problem. But I think we're terribly selfish in this country that it's not a problem until it affects me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And it's easy to turn a blind eye to it when it's not on your doorstep.
When you spoke about when these events occur or when you have person reported for you to evaluate, it struck me that first contact might have come by way of a patrol officer and having to do a crisis intervention analysis, using something at their disposal like the 24-hour hold or 48-hour hold to identify these people. And then is that passed on to you once you have that process completed? Do you assess those people coming out of the hold?
So
criteria at the hospitals
it's
with
gonna
additional
depend.
information, or are you simply waiting for an investigation to turn up a probability?
It's both. Let me just address that by saying both. Sometimes people are hospitalized, and they're hospitalized because somebody has identified this is a potential problem. Usually that's a mental health issue. And so then, of course, we would look at, okay, what does their mental health background look like? What's their history? Are they on medications? Have they been through the system before? That kind of thing. And then sometimes it's not. It's going to be somebody that was just passed along by whatever resource.
In a case where you have something passed on to you by another agency or some other investigation, um, you're obviously looking at the potential for the individual's threat level, and then who takes on the threat assessment as far as probable targets and things in that area. Who is actually evaluating the facility implications of a threat assessment? Schools, um, you know, meeting halls, churches. Who's dealing with that on top of, you've identified somebody that's a potential problem or a group. Now you also have what their potential targets are. Is that something your group also deals with?
Oh, well, certainly, yeah. And often, say there's a designated or potential designated target, they're happy to work with the group as well, because I don't think anybody wants another act of mass violence. So often that, whatever that entity is, will come to the table as well, because they want to do whatever they can to stop a potential disaster.
What percentage of the mass shootings are handled forensically versus anticipatory action going on?
I don't know that I could even give it a percentage. I kind of said that a little bit earlier. We don't really know that somebody's going to act out till after they've already acted out. I mean, you can encounter a threat, and assess it to see if it has the potential of becoming an act, but there's no real way to predict what's going to be actually acted upon.
So that being said, at least it's our company's point of view that the best way to impact the death rate from events like this is to have the patrolmen themselves trained and with the proper equipment, like a ballistic shield or something, where their training level is such that they can respond without backup in the shortest period of time, get to the point of contact, and then force a confrontation. Do you see any other way to start reducing these events or even the casualties at these events in the short term, or are we strictly looking at these type of hardening our defense and equipping our individual officers? Is there any trend that would counter that?
I think you have to do both, right? I mean, I think officer education and safety is paramount, because frequently they might be the first person to encounter this individual. So, I mean, education is a must. Whatever they need to physically protect themselves as well is extremely important.